welcome to iCritic Live. This is the podcast where we talk about entertainment, pop culture, and life in between. I'm your host, Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and thank you so much for spending a few minutes of your time here with me today. And the podcast has been kind of on pause. There's been some behind-the-scenes things I've been dealing with. I might make a video about it at some point. Unfortunately, not great news, but you know, I do like to be transparent about what's going on. But we're back, and there should be more episodes going forward. By the time you're listening to this, we should have had an interview with Gary K. Wolfe, the author of the novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit, and subsequently the creator of Roger Rabbit. That was a fun one to do. And we do have an upcoming interview with Stacy Spikes, the MoviePass CEO, to talk about MoviePass's new venture, Mogul, and we'll find out exactly what that is. It's not what you think, I'll just say that. And today is kind of like my first solo return to podcasting. I decided I kind of wanted to talk about video games because Nintendo released all their information on the Switch 2, which I honestly believe that they missed an opportunity to call it the Super Switch, but I also understand that by being clever with the naming of like the Wii U, which stood for Wii Ultimate, it did create some confusion during that era with parents going like, well, why would I get another Wii? I already have a Wii. And so by naming it the Switch 2, it's pretty clear this is the successor. This is not an add-on. This is not a souped-up version, if you will, of the first Switch model. This is its own thing. So I do kind of understand that, even though I think Super Switch would have been a cuter name, if you will. But, you know, we don't live in a time period where, you know, there's only like one previous Nintendo system to have to worry about. Now, there's multiple ones, so, you know, that's just kind of how it works. And there have been a lot of people talking about the pricing of the thing, like how it's basically $500 and might even be more if they have to factor President Trump's tariffs into the darn thing. So it's definitely on the more expensive side for a Nintendo system. But the biggest thing that people have really been paying attention to is the video game prices, because they're selling Mario Kart World, I believe it's called, for $80, and that's just digitally. And if you buy it physically, it's like $90, but then there's controversy that there's not even any game data on the little chip that comes inside the case, that it basically acts as a key to download the game, which is something that PC games have been doing for years, but console gamers, you know, they buy their physical media and with the hope that they will always have the chance to play it whenever they want. That's why retro gaming is so huge. And yet, this might change some things. This is like pushing people into the digital future more than ever, for starters, and it's also going to make games more expensive, because you know that once Mario Kart World becomes a success, everyone else is going to want to charge $80 for a game. And look, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I'm not the biggest Mario Kart fan in the world. I will play it with friends sometimes, but it's not something that I have invested a lot of time, all things considered, in my years. I have spent far more time on Final Fantasy and Sonic the Hedgehog and Halo than I ever have on Mario Kart. So, to be honest, this isn't even a game that I would probably buy on launch day. But, you know, there's other pricing controversies going on, like how they're re-releasing Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Switch 2, but they're charging like $70 for it, or something, a game that's 8 years old. And look, that game is fabulous. That's a 10 out of 10 game. But after 8 years, I mean, come on, there's got to be a price decrease at some point. And so people they're right to be concerned, especially since we know that Grand Theft Auto 6 is threatening to do $100 price on their game, and games are going to get more expensive. They're just going to get more expensive. And some people even joke like it's called the Switch 2 because you switch to a new hobby. And video games could have kind of a little bit of a crash. But one thing that is not really being discussed, and I kind of wonder if it's being overlooked, is the Xbox factor, that Nintendo might have just given Microsoft a huge win. Now, before we get into that, I do want to mention some comments how people were talking about how Nintendo with these prices showed that they don't care about you, they only care about money. Do they really need more money? They don't care about the fan. And here's the thing, folks, I do have to point out all the time that yes, Nintendo probably only cares about the money. Nintendo is a business just like everything else. I have this conversation with Disney fans when they're like, why do they make these live action remakes when they are so, creatively bankrupt? And it's like, well, they make them because they make money. I'm not mad at Disney for making those movies because they make money. I'm mad at people for buying the tickets and encouraging people, or not encouraging people, encouraging Disney to make those movies. But that can always change. You saw that with Snow White severely underperforming, that their Tangled live action remake has been paused for the time being. And I guess we'll see what happens with the live action remake of Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon, even though that's DreamWorks. Yes, these are businesses. And I also want to remind people that Hiroshi Yamauchi, who was the third CEO of Nintendo and actually brought Nintendo from making playing cards into the electronic era with the Nintendo Entertainment System, I believe he stayed all the way up to the GameCube. Yamauchi was not a gamer. He did not play video games. In fact, a lot of people say that they would love to visit the Nintendo headquarters in Japan, but when you go there, and I have actually been inside, that was that might be a story worth sharing sometime. But I actually went inside, and here's the thing: you don't see any posters for video games at all in the Nintendo headquarters in Japan. You don't see Mario anywhere. You don't see Pokemon anywhere. If you go to like Game Freak or one of the subsidies, you'll see Pokemon toys and stuff like that because they're proud of what they do. But Nintendo is a business. Yamauchi was famous for believing that games are not for fun. They're for business. The only one he really played was Go. That was it. I mean, he played some card games as well, but on the Nintendo Entertainment System, he wasn't sitting there like playing Tetris and Mario all day. He cared about them as much as how much they could sell, which might be why during the N64 and the GameCube eras, they had found a set of characters that had worked, and so they basically decided to make new games with those old characters. Maybe we'll do something a little creative like Pikmin, and we'll merge the characters all together into a fighting game called Super Smash Brothers. But for the most part, you just saw sequels. You saw like 2 Zelda games on the N64, and it was like, oh, racing games are big, so let's put Mario Kart and Donkey Kong in those scenarios. Keep in mind, Rareware, who Microsoft now owns and has not done a very good job managing them. They created a lot of your N64 classics like GoldenEye and Banjo-Kazooie. So those are all, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Those are Microsoft properties now. So Yamauchi did not play games. It was all business for him. And so when people are shocked that Nintendo is busting the door open for more expensive games and a more expensive experience, it's like, well, yeah, someone was going to do it, and it kind of makes sense that it's Nintendo, because everyone always has a Nintendo system for the Nintendo games. Like, I don't use my Switch very much. I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't. But when there's like a Mario Odyssey or Mario Wonder or Tears of the Kingdom, that thing gets broken out. Like when me and my wife play Pokemon, she would play on her Switch, I'd play on my Switch, and we'd play together. I mean, that's just, I pretty much use the Switch for Nintendo properties. And Nintendo knows this. So, of course, business-wise, it makes perfect sense for them to charge $80 for Mario Kart World because it's going to sell enough copies to justify that price. And it's frustrating because you know that other companies will cling on to that when not every game is worth $80. In fact, there's a lot of games that are probably worth about $40 if we're being honest. But they can get away with it. It's a business. But what's kind of being overlooked here is how, with this changing the industry, Nintendo might have given Xbox a major advantage in the next generation. And I'm going to explain why, because, Microsoft's pretty much been written out of the console wars, and for good reason. Microsoft, apparently they're still going to make hardware, and they would prefer you to play their games on their hardware. But they kind of see Xbox as kind of like word processing. Like, yeah, we would prefer if you use word processing on a Microsoft Surface because we make that tablet. But if you want to use it on a crappy little Dell computer, well, we're okay with that too. We're going to sell the software one way or the other. And so that's why you see Game Pass being on the PC. That's why you're seeing Game Pass built into some TVs. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft tries to get Game Pass on the PlayStation 6. Because they basically look, we can't win the console wars. We want to win the game wars. They want to make Game Pass the thing. Now, I have Game Pass. I like it. I still buy games that I personally want to own forever. But I buy a lot less games because it's like, yeah, I can download the South Park games on Game Pass and play them and beat them. The Ideoloon Chronicles, or whatever the heck it's called, downloaded both of those games, part of the subscription. The Indiana Jones game, loved that game, and Hi-Fi Rush, loved that game, but downloaded them and all that jazz. So Game Pass has a lot of value to me. Nintendo and Sony have basically decided they're not going to do that. It's like, they find it to be more valuable to sell their games individually. They're probably right. But here's the thing. What happens if the games start getting priced at $80 on average? 80 to 90 to 100. What if the next Final Fantasy game is $100? I mean, I'm a pretty big Final Fantasy fan. I don't know if I want to pay $100 for Final Fantasy 17. I'm really not sure about that one. Well, now Xbox comes along and they say, hey, whether you own our hardware or not, you can get Xbox Game Pass for $30 a month. I know it's $20 a month now. It's going to go up in price, primarily because Nintendo is going to start charging more for their physical games. But Microsoft could say, hey, $30 a month, you can have access to all these games. You can have access to the Halo series. You can have access to the Banjo-Kazooie, the Rare catalog. You can have access to all this stuff. And by the way, you can play it on the Xbox, on the PC, on your Samsung TV. Maybe you can play it on the PS6. Heck, it might even wind up on the Switch too. You never know. And as people become budget conscious, it's like they might say, okay, well, I can buy 5 games a year for how much would that be at $80? That's $400 for 5 games for the whole year. Or I can pay $30 a month each month for 12 months for $360. And I can play a lot more than 5 games if I wanted to. I can play 8 games. I could play 12 games. I could play 20 games if I want. I mean, heck, I didn't buy the Spyro Remastered Trilogy when it came out, primarily because it's like only the first game was on the disc and the other 2 games you had to download. I wasn't going to do that. But because Microsoft bought Activision, now it's on Xbox Game Pass. And so I downloaded it, as a rental. It's perfectly serviceable. And I'm midway through the second one. I completed the first one, and now I am, in the process of completing the second one. I'll probably complete the third one. And this is all part of the subscription. And the thing is, even if Microsoft rose it to like $50 a month, again, unlimited games, they can milk this as the cost to purchase games gets higher. And of course, Microsoft will still sell the games individually as well. So if you really want to own the new Call of Duty or whatever, then you can buy it. But I think Nintendo gave Microsoft a very much unexpected win. Now, who knows if they'll capitalize on it? You would think that Microsoft would mention, because right now Game Pass is $20. It's like, hey, you can get 8 months of Xbox Game Pass for the price of one Mario game, and you have access to hundreds of games. You would think Microsoft would do something like that. And if they're smart, they will capitalize on the growing disconnect with gamers on these game prices to make the Game Pass look more appealing to the average consumer. And I think they may eventually be able to do that. Now, will that mean that the Xbox game system's gonna like start selling again? No, I think Microsoft, because of the massive availability thing, especially if they get it on Switch 2 or PS6, I think you'll have people like me who like Microsoft products and like their controller and will probably get their hardware forever because it's like, why not? But they will sell a lot of subscription services, and if they can get like 10 million people paying $30 a month for this Game Pass thing, that's $300 million per month. That's $3.6 billion a year. And that's only if it hits 10 million. They could easily sell a lot more than this. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this all goes. But the bottom line is, I'll probably get a Switch. I don't know when I'm going to get the Switch 2, because I kind of am in that position where it's like, I do want the Switch 2, but I don't like these prices. Maybe I'll wait. Maybe I'll wait for a sale. Because I know that, well, if you don't agree with the prices, don't buy it. And I don't know if Switch 2 is going to flop. I think it will sell out when it launches. But whether it stays consistently sold out for the next several months like the Wii did and the original Switch did, that's going to be another question altogether. So I'll probably eventually get it, but not right away. But I think people are overlooking that this could be like a huge gift to Microsoft, and who knows, maybe even Microsoft doesn't even realize it. I don't know. So anyway, that's where I'm going to end. My question is, what do you think of the Switch 2 hardware, the games, the prices? Do you think that with these prices, you would be far more inclined to subscribe to a subscription service as opposed to buying games individually to get most of your gaming fix? I would love to know. So if you are listening to this podcast on a platform where you can leave comments, please do so. And hey, if you like what you hear, why don't we make it official? Become a subscriber. We're on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, all the major podcasting platforms of choice. Follow me on social media. And as always, I'll see you at the movies. Take care, everyone. Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters. And I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running. And of course, is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to. It is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.